Okay, today is November 17th, 2014, and we're doing an oral history with Mr. Dick Wager. Thank you very much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it very much. We're here at the Reformed Dutch Church in Hyde Park, and going to ask a few questions and have a little talk about your history. And if you want to just tell me what you just told me before about growing up in Hyde Park and Kirchner Avenue, that was really nice.
Well, Kirchner Avenue for many years was the seat, the family gathering place for my brothers and sister. And Hyde Park is, means a lot to us because of the time we've spent here. I was born in Rhinebeck, Northern Dutchess Hospital. And that was, of course, that was the most key and important hospital to the north of Dutchess. And then south you had St. Francis and yeah. Anyway, it was it really was neat to grow up here. And the street itself, Kirchner Avenue, was filled with families that had moved there after the war was over. All the veterans, mainly on that street, raised families there, worked there, and did all kinds of interesting things. My dad, for example, a sergeant in the Army in World War II, came home, bought the house on Kirchner Avenue, and put together a kind of a nice idea of what he wanted Hyde Park to be. For example, there was no riverfront. There was riverfront, but not any easy access to riverfront. There was, however, a Rogers Point boathouse. The Rogers family at one point was the top 10 richest families in the world, and there they were right on that place. But anyway, down by the river was the Rogers Point Boat Club, which my dad and 5 or 6 other men bought and turned it into a public club. So it fostered boating on the river. Our family, every Saturday and every Sunday, would get in this boat. My dad had looked like a canoe with a motor on the back, and we would chug up the Hudson to Kingston. We would go down south as far as Newburgh generally, and maybe West Point. But anyway, it was a nice way to spend most weekends. Until finally you got to a certain age and you didn't want to go out in the family in the boat anymore. You wanted to stay home. So it was a wonderful place to grow up because you had so many friends, childhood friends, and some of them were friends right up to their death. So I think, does that cover most of the ground you wanted there?
That sounds good. You know what else I wanted to ask you? You said about Kirchner Avenue. Was that whole section of town there, did that build up after World War II, or was it pretty well built up before that?
Kirchner Avenue was pretty well built up before that, and right in the backyard was the Hyde Park Elementary School.
Right.
And so the children all walked to school. They walked through our yard and then over to the house, over to the school. And that was kind of a good way to go to school. Every single day I would go home because they only walked. I mean, literally, they bounced the properties. I would get home and my grandmother would have some lunch, and she was a wonderful woman who really was a great caretaker of the kids. The only thing is, she was compulsive. We had, if we took a shirt off and put it on the side of the bed or someplace while we did something else, she would have it up the stairs, into the washing machine, and out on this thing, quick. I mean, you just took the clothes right off your back, but she wanted us to be clean and spotless at school, and we weren't.
Good for your grandmother.
That was very nice. So that was the kind of thing my dad did, and all the Legion guys, they all had events going here and there. In Hyde Park at that time, one of the big summer events was a clam bake. Right now, where the firehouse is, that was the place where they had big pits and fire things, and the whole town would go there for
The
a
new
clam.
firehouse?
It was gone. I mean, it was old at that point, and then we took it down to put up the new one.
Okay.
But they'd have these clam bakes were remarkable, and how good they were. And I was a little kid, used to go and eat raw clams until they came out my ears. We were all, the only thing we didn't drink any of the beer. The men pretty well took care of that.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I have a sister and 2 brothers, and one brother's deceased. And he was a good guy, good athlete, good at high school. And so he's gone. But my other brother lives in Pleasant Valley, and my sister has a place in Rhinebeck. She stayed here in Hyde Park for years and years. But when her husband died, she started living in Florida in the winters, and then coming up for the summers here. Interesting enough, some of her best friends are people who she was friend with in that early days of Hyde Park. You asked about how Hyde Park was shaped. What it did, if you look at where the old Grand Union is, that shopping center in there, across the street was a road that ran on down to the Rogers family and barns and things. So you would have that in the area where they had the most activity was what is now Cromwell. And the Van Wagners built the Cromwell estate. But while it was there, before that housing was put in, it was a polo ground, and it was where the Rogers family would have polo matches.
Really?
And there's a gray building right along where Malloy's used to be, or right in there. That's one of the barns for the polo horses.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Also, they had a famous baseball team, the Robin Hoods.
Oh, yeah.
And the Robin Hoods were a remarkable baseball team. They had really good ones. And the guys who played on those teams were probably big league caliber. So you had this big, huge field, with some of which is still there. You had barns and you had all that. One of the things I wish had happened, and I was probably one of the ones who stopped it from being happened, but when the Rogers family left, there was an opportunity for the town of Hyde Park to buy that big old red mansion, the barns, and all the fields. You would have had great offices. You know, we had a swimming pool back there too, which we swam in a lot. So it probably would have been a fine idea. I, of course, didn't like the idea, so I'd tell everybody in town I didn't like my mother, who was the first woman realtor in Dutchess County. It had a slogan that said, "Make mine Hyde Park." And she put it in her advertising, she put it on the radio, she did all those things. It was a really good slogan, "Make mine Hyde Park." And she lived off that for years.
Now, was she in favor of buying the property over there?
I think she was. She was more farsighted than her son. I was looking at it and thinking this is going to be an enormous debt. Well, that was just wrong. But it's easy enough to be wrong.
Would have been nice now.
Yeah, it's easy enough to. The railroad bridge is one example, of how easy it is to be wrong, because the guy who fostered that whole idea came to me one day and said, "What do you think, Dick? Can we get behind this and really move?" And I said, I don't think this railroad bridge is a good idea at all. So I see the result. It's a wonderful addition.
It's great.
So
Now, where did you go to school?
Hyde Park Elementary School, Roselle High School. In those days, Roselle High School had the 7th, 8th, and 9th. So it was those 2 schools, and then I went to St. Lawrence College, and then into the Army for a couple of years.
What did you major in college?
English literature. And I'll tell you the story about that. When I went up to St. Lawrence, looked around and decided I wanted to be an English major because I love writing, love books, and all that. And I can remember calling my dad, and he was in Hyde Park. And I said, Dad, I decided I'm going to major in English literature and history as a minor. And there was this big dead silence on the other end, total dead silence. Here he was just thinking, probably this is the first wager to go to college like this in this country. And here he wanted to be an English major. So my dad said, well, why can't you be an engineer? And I said, Dad, I can't add. So he suffered along for it, but it worked out okay. I mean,
Well, I guess so.
made a living here. So.
Did you, when you finished the Army, what did you do with that? Did you go to work with the English major?
Well, what I did was I took ROTC while I was in college. So I had ROTC. I joined the reserve, Army Reserve, so I had that. I was ordered to Korea, but I went to airborne school, so that held that up for a while. Anyway, when it was all done, I was probably the highest paid second lieutenant in the country. I really think so. So I went over to Korea for 18 months, and that was just after the war, 2 years or so after the war. And it was a very interesting couple of years. So, but when I missed something in here. Just when I got out of St. Lawrence, or got out of high school. No, when I got out of St. Lawrence, I had an opportunity to get a job at the Poughkeepsie Journal, and so, and that was an interim job because at the end of a certain period, I would go off on active duty. So while I was at Poughkeepsie Journal, I was a copy editor. Great job, terrible pay, but a really, really good job. And the guys who ran that paper said to me, "We would like you to come back here when you're back out of the Army." So I did that. Went to work. I had a choice: Western Printing or the Poughkeepsie Journal, and so we went with the Journal, and it was a good move.
Well, you were there for a long time, right?
40 years. 40 years in the Poughkeepsie Journal, and I think 30 of them as publisher running the place. And you know, I really grew to love the newspaper business. Historically, it was lousy paid business, but it was gave you a sense of excitement, a sense of accomplishing something. If you're somebody who likes things like I do, you start here and you end there. You don't stretch it out. It's something here and there. And that's the newspaper business. You get the news in here, comes in, you deal with it, you print it, whatever, and off you go to the next one, which is, I found, very, very comfortable.
Were you a reporter too?
I was a reporter and then a copy editor, and I was city editor, managing editor, publisher, and then group vice president with the Gannett Company. And I had as many as 8 newspapers now and then who reported to me.
Wow.
It was mostly small, medium newspapers like Niagara, Saratoga, Utica, papers like that. And what that did, it gave me an opportunity not to get bored in the job I had, because I would select where I'd go the coming week, deal with the problems at that paper, and then go back to Poughkeepsie. So it was kind of neat. In there, work this out. When I was working at the Poughkeepsie Journal, I got married to a quiet, charming, lovely woman named Ellen Clarkson.
Who's sitting over there?
Who's sitting over there making odd gestures. So actually, that was one of the luckier moves I ever made in my life. bumping into her because it's been such a success.
She a hometown girl?
She's a Long Island girl who had a summer place up in Stanfordville. So she knew and dated most of those hicks up in the...
Where'd you meet?
Oh, we met at Rogers Point Boat Club for one thing.
Handy.
Yeah, she was at a wedding, and it was one of the maids of honor. And I was riding up and down the Hudson with these two good friends of mine in a boat. We had the boat here and a lot of beer in the back of it, and we rode up and down the Hudson, had a good time. There's this guy on the shore at Rogers Point waving to us to come in. And we did, and it turned out that was, I think, the father of the bride, and he just wanted more people there. So that's how I met Ellen.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 4.
4. I just wanted to ask you another question about when you were at the paper.
Sure.
What was your favorite story then, over the years?
Favorite or most difficult?
Well,
or
favorite. We'll do the favorite first. Most difficult, most exciting, most historical.
Well, they sort of blend in. The Kennedy thing comes to mind immediately. That's the first one I think of when I think of big stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was walking out of the wire room at the paper, and I looked and it said, bulletin, bum, 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 bum. Reports are that the president has been shot. So that got the whole newsroom galvanized. In fact, the whole country galvanized. And we worked around the clock doing reaction stories and editorials and all those things, dealing with this terrible murder. And I remember George Palmentier, an old newspaper guy, who just did a wonderful job on that story, and he oversaw a lot of things. And at the end of it, when it was all done, I mean, as far as the immediacy thing, George collapsed, cried.
Wow.
It just rattled him to his bones, and as it did everybody, really. So he had that story. I think that the whole assassination thing with Martin Luther King, and if you remember, there was all these services and things in Poughkeepsie dealing with that, and there was a big rally down by the Hudson River, down at foot of Main Street. A lot of speakers, and a lot of them talked about love and how we need to pull together and all this. There was one guy, if you remember, who stood up and he said, "Go get your guns. Go get them." And he was trying to get everybody to go start shooting, and he was trying to actually have anarchy. Luckily, this community just ignored that, but it was there and it was real. So then there's the moon launch, the moon landing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good story. That was an interesting story. The Middletown Record had the thing moon on the front page, but one of the O's, they put eyes in a mouth, and ran in the paper. This is one of the most serious accomplishments, and these goofy guys that did that with them. I thought that was really funny. The one story that I wondered if there was a way we could have done it differently, and that was the Tawana Brawley story, which rattled the community, and those poor guys, unjustly accused of rape, and a black on white rape. And Al Sharpton's role in that thing is just disgusting. That's the way I can say it. He twisted the truth. He tried to get people just as worked up as any way he could. And he was trying to make himself a, quote, black leader, which I think he's probably succeeded.
Not the best way, I don't think.
I hope not. I found that whole deal appalling, just horrible.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what other, come to mind. I interviewed Richard Nixon.
Really?
It was between, he wasn't in office, he was out of office, and he was coming up to IBM to make a speech and raise some money. And so I dutifully interviewed him, and I had a whole list of very boring questions dealing with his putting together a campaign team to run again. And so at what I thought was the end of the interview, I said, "Oh, okay, thank you, sir, and this is the end of this thing." So I started to go, and he reached up and he grabbed my arm and he said, "No, no, sit down, I want to talk to you about it." And he said, this is at the height of the Vietnam thing, it was going along. He said, "I think we should bomb the port of Haiphong." Now, Haiphong was the big supply port, and if you did do that, it meant an escalation of the war right away. And so that was a good byline story to get, because it was just an interesting story.
But he was interesting to interview, huh?
Yeah, he really was one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. And when people talk about Richard Nixon, they talk about, one, how they think he was a crook, but two, if they knew him at all, they talk about what a brilliant man he was and some of the brilliant things he did, which is like open the door to China. People had talked about that for years. He did it.
How long after he was out of office was that interview?
I can't remember exactly. He still had a lot of political clout, and really did, I think. He went on to win the presidency, ultimately. So, and then we had Bobby Kennedy came through Poughkeepsie. He was a tough little guy, he was small and cocky, and just a man you can see who was used to having his way. There was a Democratic chairman, Al Heck, county, and I walked by this building, and there was Al Heck, and Bobby Kennedy had him sort of pinned up against the wall and was going like this with his finger and yelling at Al that if he ever came to Poughkeepsie again, they better have a better turnout than they did this time.
Whoa.
They would just boom. So what a little toughie he was, and he was very used to having his way.
I don't remember him being here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You've met a lot of really interesting people, huh?
Yeah.
A lot of historical types.
Yeah, I met Nelson Rockefeller was a really interesting guy, smart. He had something going that was really stirring up the folks in the Catskills. I've forgotten what it was. But he was invited to come to see this group, and they're really hostile, they're very angry, and they're waiting for him to show up. When he shows up and he gives them a big grin and slaps a few on the back, and in about 5 or 10 minutes he had the whole place in the palm of his hand. Just really interesting how he could do that. So he was
got the knack.
He had the knack.
Yeah.
He was a good guy. Funny one to interview, and I'll leave it at that, is Tim Leary. Tim Leary was the LSD advocate, Harvard professor, crazy guy, and he had this place called the Hitchcock Estate in Millbrook. You know the big gate and
Yep.
things along in there. He started setting up house and inviting in these young people who were so interested in, and he was married to an absolutely gorgeous woman who did wander around in a white gown with flowers in her hair and a whole bit. And I had 2 or 3 young reporters who went up there to interview people up there, and he came back and said, "Dr. Leary says if we get your permission, we can crawl in this box and the lights will start flashing and it'll feel like it's an LSD trip. Can we do it?" And I said, "No, you can't do that." Out in the woods out there were dozens of young people, all who hadn't been in, didn't have a shower in weeks. Really kind of a grubby bunch. And Larry Quinlan, who was the sheriff at that time, would take a couple of buses, go out to Millbrook and go out in the woods and round up all these kids who would come in and all smelly and dirty and mosquito bit, and then off they would go. Well, interesting enough, Larry was doing that. Trying to remember who, the judge, Al. Yeah, Al Rosenblatt was one of the assistant DAs, and he was under, Gordon Liddy was another one of the assistant DAs. And so you had that interesting kind of a thing going on. You had future judge of the highest court in New York State, in the state. You had Gordon Liddy, who arguably, I think, if you really look into it, without Gordon, Nixon never would have been impeached, because there wouldn't have been that the break-in, because the break-in was Gordon's idea.
Oh, really?
And he led the team into the building. So, and then he lied about it, and that's why he went to prison. But then he got out after a couple of years, I think. But so that was a cast of characters, really funny. And Larry Quinlan was always doing something. One time he had, and I'll tell you this story. There was a guy named Worley, and he was a painter, but he also had a problem with drinking too much, and so he would end up in trouble. So what they would do is, Quinlan would say, as the winter arrived, go get so-and-so and bring him in here, and he had this guy painting all winter. So he'd paint the whole jail. And Quinlan just thought that was a great move on his part.
I remember him. Yeah. Well, sounds like you had a real interesting job there.
It was an interesting job. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Of course, the job I had also entailed, money, profit. Had to be concerned about that, and that was part of the business that I didn't love, but I understood it. You have to do it. Oh, yeah, she's talking about Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and Moynihan was one of the, a wonderful wonderful U.S. senator, and he was an author, very good writer, just a genius of a man, and he had the Irish curse though. He drank too much, and one time we were up in Saratoga, and he was giving a speech, and it was a really pretty good speech, and at the end of his speech, he said, "Thank you very much," and he said, "Come on, Dick," and he grabbed me by the arm. We were running down through the halls of this posh kind of hotel to Gideon Putnam, and he ran down to the bar, and he said, "Two." The bartender knew exactly what he was talking about. Gave him a shot of white wine, drank that literally just like this. Down it went, and he never batted an eyelash that he shouldn't be doing that. He just did it. And he was so smart that he could figure out things and get them to get done in a half a day, because in the afternoon, forget it. In the morning, he was in great shape. Right, he could be a writer, he could be a speaker, he could be all this. Give you an idea how much trouble he can get into when he was drinking. One time he gave a speech to the New York City policemen and cops. They filled up this place. So instead of saying, normally a politician say, "Wonderful to see you here, you guys are tremendous, great work you're doing for the community," and blah, blah, blah. And Moynihan stood up and said, "You guys don't know what the hell you're doing, blah, blah." He just chewed him out, and then he moved on. But it was just an example of what he could do and what he couldn't do.
So
I liked him a lot, and he and I were friends, and I liked some of his books, And in fact, he sent me a book in proof to look it over and make comments and so on.
Hmm. He didn't live around here though, did he?
Yeah, yeah. Where did he live? He lived out west of here. He lived in a community, a farmer kind of community,
Oh, okay.
and I don't know, but that's that one.
I want to ask you with all the technology that we have now, being a newspaper man, what do you see as the future of newspapers? You think I know it seems like the Journal isn't, they're not in Poughkeepsie now, and it seems like there's not that much in the paper sometimes. You see papers going downhill a little bit with it.
Oh, lots. We've lost a lot of newspapers. What happens, and it happened initially on a grand scale, everybody wrote off newspapers. They just said, we've got all these electronic things, we can store everything within it. And there was some real benefits. I mean, you could have reporters looking up things in the library without leaving their desk. So there was those things. But then the people start saying, well, if they can get the news electronically, we don't need newspapers and we don't need presses and we don't need all this. And so the newspapers started falling, just click, gone. And those that succeeded, for example, the Times is profitable, the Washington Post is profitable, the Poughkeepsie Journal is still profitable, but not on the same scale as it was. So when the stocks in those newspapers just dropped, and so they cut costs. Absolutely, the first reaction was cut costs, and that's what they did. They would lay people off, and never had done that at the Times or at the Post. And then they had to do it, and they had to do it pretty rapidly, or else they would have gone out. Now that when my last couple of years at the Journal, I've been working on this project, a new press, a new mailroom, a new all kinds of things, and the total cost of that was about $24 million. So Gannett put that kind of money into Poughkeepsie because it expected that things would go along as they had gone along. Well, boom, the revenue dropped like a stone. So then they started looking around for somebody else to do some of the work. So they sent paper down first to Westchester, then to New Jersey, to be printed there. And they took this beautiful press and this beautiful mailroom, ripped it out and junked it. Why'd they do that? Because otherwise they had to assume all that depreciation, the taxes, and so on. So when they removed it, they took care of that. But I found that painstaking. I really did. Rattled me.
Sad to see the building down there without the paper in it.
It's got the newsroom and the advertising department and a few clerks, but that's it.
Yeah.
And we used to have 70, 75 people in the newsroom.
Such a beautiful building.
It was called the News Cathedral when it was built in, I think it was built in '39. Beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
They had brass in the lobby. You walked on marble on the stairway. Just everything that a building should be. And today it still looks the same from the outside, and it looks wonderful from the inside too. So in that sense, those guys who bought it, who spent $5 million on it, which is just a steal, they bought it and they put in office spaces, and they really did a nice job.
Oh, that's good. So I've only been in that building once or twice, and it's just a nice building.
Well,
So
if you get
pretty
a
on the
chance,
outside.
go in again, because it really is nice.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Hyde Park. Let's get back to Hyde Park here. Has it changed over the years to you a lot?
Yeah, it really has. And how has it changed? A mixed blessing. It was when I was a kid, you knew everybody. I could rattle off the names of people in the village, part of the hamlet, actually. And so you had that sense, but as they grew, and this subdivision came in and that subdivision came out, it lost some of that little small town, a little went away. And now lately, the last few years, they had a hard time with Hyde Park, a hard time figuring out how they wanted to grow and where they wanted to grow. And I don't envy those folks who are putting in hours trying to get it straight. Because you know, you have the old Grand Union building.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work in the Grand Union. I was a really good stock boy. And so we had that building still empty after years. And if you go up and down 9G, Ellen likes to say 9G is just a disaster, but I think it has in some. It's gone down because they build certain things and they don't work out. And then you have the Whole Bowl, and it used to be a successful bowling alley, and and you can go all around the town and wonder what happened. Well, some of the things that happened was that the taxes got a little high here, and people decided they can move to someplace else.
IBM too, when they let a lot of people go.
No, thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
I remember once when I did a story on IBM, I was the publisher of the paper, and I was talking to the guy who ran East Fishkill, and I can't think of his name, but he was working very hard to get capital. And in IBM they had competition between groups to get that capital money, and so East Fishkill succeeded in doing all that. And a few years later, they had no work, none. You go down there and people would be just sitting around. So when the IBM started just carving up, it's a darn shame. And I don't know what's going to happen with all the moves they've done now. The guy who covers that beat is very optimistic, and he said, you know, from what he's talked to IBM people enough, that he thinks there's going to be a success in East Fishkill, not necessarily by IBM, but certainly somebody in that field.
Hmm.
So if that happens, that could be a very good thing.
What do you think should change in Hyde Park to make it better?
I think they should have a cohesive, well thought out plan that decides where they want the central, you know, we talk about the central part of the town.
Mm.
Post office there and the town hall is there, and that's about it. It seems to me that the central part of the town has already moved south. And you got that big shopping center there. That's really a success. You go by there, it's packed.
Yep.
So that might be the center of the town, and then you try to build it like that. But traditionally, I don't think it's going to be the same way, in the same sense. When my mother was in business, right near here, up by the city hall or town hall, that clearly was the center, because there was the town hall there when that building burned down.
Right.
Then you had the row of houses, row of shops, and that burned down. That was one other thing that I should have mentioned earlier, is that the town hall itself was used for all kinds of things. Like Fridays in Hyde Park was a free movie. You'd go up to the town hall, and somebody would come in with a rickety old camera thing, and we'd watch cowboys.
This was the old town hall on Main Street that
Yep.
burned up. Yeah. I used to have dance lessons in there.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see, it was used for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And what a shame that was.
Didn't they have dinners and everything in there too? Seems to me I remember that.
Yeah,
It's
they
a
did.
long time ago. What's your best memories of Hyde Park?
Oh, I think the early memories are the
Really?
best. I think the fun we had. I mean, I loved Roseville High School. I enjoyed that a whole bunch, and teachers who I liked a lot.
What year did you graduate?
56.
56.
And the teachers out there were really nice, I thought, when I was going there. And I talked to Ellen today about, there was an English teacher who had a kind of a major influence on me. She was the first to say, you can write very well, your instincts for writing are good, you ought to do something in the writing field. So she said that, and that's why I looked at Western Printing, and that's why I looked at Poughkeepsie Journal, because I also, when I was in high school, I was the sports editor of the Hyde Park Townsman.
Oh, okay.
Hyde Park Townsman had a guy named Hillary, Hillary, who was the editor of that Hyde Park Townsman, Hillary Masters, and it was a very successful weekly paper for a long time.
It was a nice paper.
Then Hillary and his wife bought the Hyde Park Playhouse Barns, the farm. They bought that and they turned it into a theater. And it was an interesting thing because we'd go up there and watch all the people working in the theater. There was big old ropes up there, and part of the thing had hay still in it. You could jump into the hay. It was really neat. But then had those fires and St. James Church.
Yeah.
Just an awful thing.
Yeah.
And all the suspicions and the accusations that floated around on that damaged the church just like the fire was damaged. I think today that Chuck Kramer's got that place humming.
Yeah, it's a good church.
Really a good church.
Yeah.
And this one is a good church, and one up the road a piece here.
Which one?
Royman.
Oh,
Yeah.
The Methodist Church?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a busy one.
They do quite a bit, yeah.
And then if you go
We're
to
kind of
Regina,
small here,
yeah,
but.
if you go to Regina Challey,
Hmm?
Regina Challey has
Yeah.
not one service, but two, three services.
Yeah. We're small, but we're happy.
Yeah, well, that's the same way with St. James. They're small, but they're real happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very, very important so when they had the fire in the church, there was a big debate, and they rebuilt it using, where possible, every same stone.
Yeah.
They really tried to build it as it had been, and succeeded, except for the stained glass windows. They're not nearly as many as there once were.
Yeah. I remember when they were trying to raise money, they sold the church mice. Do you remember those?
No,
With a brick in the bottom of it for the original church.
Oh, I don't
And then they
remember.
made a mouse around it, and they called it the church mouse. I have
Yeah.
one home. It's from the original church. It's kind of cute.
Yeah.
It was a nice idea somebody thought of. A lot of work too,
Sure.
but they did it.
Oh.
They did it.
Let's see. Things that shouldn't be forgotten are things like the regattas, rowing on the Hudson, kids rowing, racing. They lost the collegiate
Mhm.
meet, but held it together, I think, pretty well. And that's an important.
Were you involved in sports in school?
Yeah.
Did you row?
I was a coxswain.
Oh.
I weighed 112 pounds, I think, something like that in my freshman year. But I played soccer and I made all county, which is a big deal when you're that age. And I played basketball on the basketball team. So there's a lot of that. And then all my life now, I was a runner. Really enjoyed it. And under here I have a T-shirt that says Dick's First Marathon. I ran New York Marathon
Wow.
10 years ago. Yeah, about
That must
10.
have been exciting.
It was exciting. It was a blast. To get there though, you had to work and run 8 miles a day. And on the weekends we would run, sometimes through Vanderbilt, so we'd run around that loop, 3-mile loop, run it 6 times.
Wow.
And you think about it, how a marathon's crazy, but I'm glad I did it. Very glad I did it.
Nice memory to have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so cold, and we ran so far, just kept going and going. And had a group that would run out ahead of us. They would say, where do they cross next? And get there and they wait and I think I probably would have had another half an hour off the time. No, I wouldn't. But it was something I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah. How old were you when you did that?
60.
Wow, that's amazing. No, that's really something. I know there's a couple from our church that ran it this year, and it was great for them.
Oh yeah.
So
You know, it's something you're not going to do it again probably. But I think in retrospect, I probably should have kept going, training, and then I wouldn't have had that big fall off. But I had enough marathon. I won.
So you're retired now,
Yeah.
and what do you do? Travel?
This year we went to Alaska,
Nice.
which is really nice. Have you been there?
No, it's one place we haven't
You might
been.
want to do that someday because it is remarkable. The glaciers and the animals and it's beautiful, beautiful place.
Maybe we'll have time now.
Yeah, yeah. Where else have we been, Ellen? Ireland. Oh yeah, Ireland.
Oh, everybody
Ireland.
seems to love that.
Yeah, well, you got to, the Mick here. She's got all these paperwork on her family and all the genealogy, and it's nice to have. And
Yeah.
she keeps up correspondence with some of the people in Ireland. And Ireland is a beautiful place. Think about it though, it's a sad place. All the fighting and shooting. But
Everybody I know who's been there just wants to go back.
yeah, that's true. And I can understand that. But you know what I think? I think there's so many good things to see in this country that I almost feel like we ought to make a checklist because we've not been to Yosemite. We did go to the Grand Canyon,
That's
and
beautiful.
it's just gorgeous. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it, Niagara Falls, but Ellen's not seen Niagara Falls. That's one of the wonders of the world. People from around here ought to go look at it.
It's
As they
amazing.
should go to Vanderbilt's and they should go to Roosevelt's and they should do all these things around here. Start here, get as many done here, and then move out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. Because if you want to go ahead and go to Europe, Belgium or something, what do you want to do that for? Go look at these.
There's so much here.
There's so much here. Just amazing.
It's beautiful. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question. What local event affected you most as a Hyde Park resident?
Local event.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ongoing thing has been the Roosevelt family. I think I was like in kindergarten or first grade or something like that when Mrs. Roosevelt would drive up, pay a visit, and she would do that, I think, fairly often. There was a guy named, her driver was a guy named Tubby something. He was an enormous man who would drive her around.
Tubby Curran?
Yeah. You know, yeah. That was fun. So other things that I'm doing, I'm writing poetry. And I'm having a good time doing it. I'm going to keep at it. It's hard but it's fun.
That's nice.
Yeah, so I'm going to put that in. And I finished a novel. But I deep down I'm not satisfied with it, but some people who know writing tell me that's the normal reaction to these things. But I look at it and say, yeah, it's pretty good, but if I did this, if I did that, if I did this, I did that. If I did that, I'd have it 10 years, I still wouldn't have it done. So we proclaimed it done, finished it up, and now we're trying to see where we can go with it, if any place.
That's really, what kind of novel is it?
History.
History?
Fiction.
Oh,
So,
fiction.
Fiction, yeah, historical novel. And so I have a good time with that because last year and the year before I always got to go someplace to look at the battlefields and look at all the kind of things that you might want to look at. For example, the Battle of Oriskany which people don't know much about, but it was a turning point for the revolution. Big battle that actually split. Neither side really won, but it was a doggone the bloodiest thing ever, and it went on for a couple of days.
It's
That
the
whole- that whole-
Revolutionary War?
Revolutionary War.
Revolutionary War.
It was the Mohawks against the Americans, really. Mohawks and the English together.
Mhm.
Or after the Patriots, you want to call them Patriots or whatever, but that's so I enjoy that enormously. It's fun. Go out and look. I have a friend though that won't go to the Saratoga battlefield anymore.
You need to let us read that book. Sounds like something we'd like.
Yeah, we're into the Civil War. And
Well, you know, one of the things I got done with this thing, and some of the sceneries that I portrayed accurately are really, really, really gory. You know, just really bloody. I mean, because that's exactly what happened. And actually, that same thing carried on for another 100 years from here west, another 100 years, and then you get to the battles in the west where Indians were slaughtered and the white people were slaughtered, Custer was slaughtered. So there. And then, if you want to get in the Civil War, I don't want to do that. I've read 6 or 8 books on the Civil War, and it's too complicated for me. And
It's wonderful.
it is wonderful.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
I got a book right now. It's like 7 battles that major league impacts on the Fredericksburg was one, Gettysburg was another. I forgot. But if you like history, I guess that's really. I like it. I love history. I've liked that since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's great. Well, congratulations on finishing your novel.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Now I've got to do, get somebody to look at it, and that's the hard part.
Well, I hope you get it done. That sounds like an interesting thing. How long did it take you to write it? Oh, should I ask?
Really long.
Really long.
The problem is, I'm easily distracted, and in the summertime, you yell golf, I'll be on the course in a minute. I really enjoy things like that. And I travel, I like that. But the serious writers many of them put in 8 hours a day.
You
And
didn't?
or 2 hours a day. Yeah. Huh?
Marist.
On the board, you mean? Oh, well, Marist College is an important thing in the community, certainly, and I was on that board, I think, close to 20 years. And during those 20 years, there was a lot of building, constructing, and so on. But nothing like what has occurred in the last 10 years. It's just amazing. And if you've not been, have you been there lately?
No, I haven't been in there, but,
It's so pretty. The buildings are wonderful.
yeah.
And they did it very well with fieldstone being the center kind of building material. And it's really nice. So anyway, we've kept up a friendship there. Ellen and I have. Dennis Murray is a friend of ours, and the basketball team is an important thing to us. That
Yeah.
is the girls' basketball team.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So we have season tickets to both the girls and the boys, and I think that's just a wonderful thing that's happened to Marist, particularly the young women.
do you go to the away games too?
No,
No, just home games.
just home. Then we go to Florida for a month. Go to Florida for a month, maybe 5 weeks, and we enjoy that. 'Cause I've reached the point.
Whereabouts in Florida?
Flagler. Yeah, New Smyrna and Flagler Beach, that kind of area, north of Daytona.
Oh, okay.
But you have to I, for years, didn't want to go to Florida, and it's still not a thrilling place to go. I just like going there because it's warm. And it's cold up here.
Yeah,
But I absolutely love the Hudson Valley. So beautiful. And I totally love that Vanderbilt view, right,
Yeah.
of the river. And it's remarkable how pretty that is. And there's places like that all over. There's hilltops and all over Dutchess County and the Highlands and the West Points and on and on. Just, it's a magnificent part of the world.
yeah. It's beautiful. I just bought some note cards that somebody painted yesterday at a craft fair, and there were 4 different views of the Hudson River.
There you are.
It's very pretty. Well, no matter where you go, it's so pretty. It's a good river.
It is.
It's amazing what some people call a river. You go different places and there's different, this is the river.
Somebody else was telling me that same thing, that they said to somebody, call that a river?
Yeah, that's it.
And if you want to look at the Rhine, it's dirty, really dirty. But it's also scenic. I like to deal with that whole idea of scenery, of communities within the Hudson Valley. Just so neat. The painters and
Yeah.
just load you up.
I like Olana and the view from up there.
I've been there maybe twice, Alana, and the view is remarkable. And wow, what a painter.
Yeah,
Frederick Church, right?
it's beautiful up there,
Yeah.
yeah. He is amazing.
He is
Thomas
amazing.
Cole and Frederick Church, they're just amazing.
Hmm.
I love their stuff.
I do too.
I've got another question for you. Who is the most influential person or the most influential people in your life and why?
One of the most influential people is sitting right there, and has been, has had any kind of impact on me. A lot of just encouragement, and certainly we make children just absolutely the center of our lives, and the little grandchildren coming along now are an additional center of our lives because they're so cute.
Yeah,
God, they are. And I also have the ability now, as Grandpa, say, "Oh well, enjoy yourself, children. Ellen, I'm going over." And they go like this: "Dad has disappeared. Where did he go? He's in the library. He's in the den." That's the other thing. We built a house about 10 years ago on the Hudson. And it's, as you go to Rogers Point on that road, our house is right there and we have a view of the Hudson. The bank of the Hudson is right here on our deck.
oh, nice.
And it's very nice. And Ellen and the architect worked very hard to make sure that every room has a glass that you can see the Hudson.
Wow,
Yeah, it's a lot of glass.
sure it's beautiful.
It is. I say modestly, I didn't do anything to do with it, I wrote the checks.
That's a good thing to do.
Huh? Well, my mom and my dad were super people who did the same thing. They made children and family center of the family, and it worked out, very nicely. And I think we learned from them what we can do in raising our own kids, and I think that's just a good example of how things pass on from generation to generation. Good practices with kids pass on to the next generation, to the next generation.
Sounds like your grandma was a good influence too,
She was a character, just
from what you said
a
before.
remarkable woman.
Yeah,
But we've now got genealogy stuff. We know that Uyghurs landed here in 1740, and they spread out. The Wurtemberg Church is one of the churches that they went to. Town of Clinton Town Hall has a lot of Uyghurs in the books there. So the roots are deep here, and we like that.
Well, let's see. I don't have too many more questions for you on here. You have church affiliation?
St. James.
You go to St. James?
Ellen goes to Regina Challey.
Hmm?
Ellen goes to Regina Challey. I go to St. James. And I was an altar boy at St. James when I was a kid, and would serve on the altar with candles and books and whatever. And St. James was kind enough to give me a scholarship when I was going to St. Lawrence.
Wow.
So that was a day. I guess the church is a little more flush then than it is now.
That's nice. Well, Roosevelt's were there then, right?
Yeah. Well, there was out of the blue. Have you ever been to that graveyard thing? Wasn't it fun? Well, there was one woman in there who gave them, or her relatives gave the church $1 million a few years back, a good number of years back, and so that helped the church.
Boy, that's nice.
Yeah, that was. I think it was that lady named Hetty Green.
Don't know.
She was the richest woman in the United States and probably the meanest. She was so tight and so cheap she wouldn't give money to anyone. Her son lost his leg because she wouldn't fund the medical costs. And she was so rich, she was just sick.
Did she live here?
I don't think she did. I think she lived in New York.
Oh, but she's buried here?
Yeah, she's buried here.
Wow.
Why, I don't know.
Huh.
But there's a lot of oddballs in that nice cemetery.
Well, we've gone to the cemetery tours, the
Yeah.
nighttime ones, and they've all been really interesting.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
It's fun to learn stuff like that.
Oh, isn't that great? They're going to do it again next year.
Yeah. Well, they get a huge turnout, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
3 or 4 nights.
Yeah. That's nice. I know we waited for quite a while one time when we went, because they were, we didn't have reservations. But. Oh, and you're a member of the Historical Society. And,
Yes.
Have you done any presentations for them, or you just come to the meetings?
I just come to the meeting so far.
Have you been a member long?
No,
No.
few years. Member of the Hyde Park Society, Historical Society. No, I'm a member of the Dutchess County Historical Society, and they do good work.
I've never been to their meetings. I joined it because I wanted to do some research through it, but I've never been to their meetings. The meetings they have at the Hyde Park Historical Society, they always get really nice speakers.
Patsy does a wonderful job.
Oh, she does a great job.
Patsy, you do a great job.
Patsy? Talking about Patsy?
Yeah. Yeah, she's always saying how she wants, she's been president of the society for 15 years, and I just keep telling her she does too good a job.
Can't replace her.
No, she's
It's
stuck
true.
with it. Yeah,
She is.
she's stuck with it. So.
Well, I can't think of anything else. You've worn me out here.
I wore you out. You did a great job. Is there anything else you want to chat about, or just that you can think about? I mean, you don't have to go strictly by this. You can certainly, if you think of something else, go for it.
There's the only other thing. As a newspaper publisher in a town this size, as Dutchess County, you're involved in lots and lots of things. And probably one of the things I like being involved in, because it was a short time kind of thing, was Hudson River Housing. It's an organization putting up housing for indigent people, housing just on a short-term basis for people who have been out of their home by fire or flood or whatever. And I think that organization has done some great things.
Mm-hmm.
My interest during the years I was at the Journal, one of my key interests, and because it was my interest, it was the newspaper's interest, is in things dealing with the environment. worked to, I worked to get the Hudson Valley Greenway.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I was one of the founders of that. I called the governor up, Mario Cuomo, and said to him that the Greenway bill was stuck. And I said to him, we've got to have it, we need it. And he said, well, they're telling me, people down there are telling me that they're going to lose money because the state is getting into something they shouldn't get into. And I just said, Governor, I think this thing really needs to be approved. It's going to be a big influence on tourism. And he said, okay, so he signed it. So that was part of my interest.
That's wonderful.
But there's, over the years, I really liked what we saw in the Hudson and what was being done about a lot of bad things like PCBs. That really was a disaster, and it really was an amazing thing to get GE to agree to dredge all that up.
Mm.
So the environment's been key to me, and you worry about impact on bad legislation on the Catskills, or recently there's a big move to take some land out of the trust in the Adirondacks. Shouldn't happen. Should keep those places pristine.
Mm. Just too little land left that you can enjoy.
Yeah.
So, gotta save it.
Well, if they start drilling for oil everywhere, and it's shale and fracking, we're going to have real problems. I think if they start fracking too close to the watershed, they can knock out the watershed for New York City. 8-9 million people. We're going to get water like they have today. It's pure. They don't have to treat it at all. It just flows right into the reservoirs and out to the homes. So that's an important thing, and people really need to work on that.
Are you still involved in like politics as far as like the environment and talking to people about it, like the government or the governor and all that? Do you still do all that kind of thing, or just no?
I don't. When I left the board at Marist, I decided I'd leave all the boards I was on. And when I looked at the list of things that I'd been involved in, I said to myself, I think you've done your share. And so that's what happened. I just did the things I'd like to do, rather than sort of doing your duty.
Yeah.
But I picked and chose mostly over the years to make sure that I didn't get involved with crazy things. No.
Like the railroad bridge?
Who is that? That's Fred.
Schaefer.
Fred Schaefer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, Dick, you got to get behind it. Fred, I'm not sure it's a good idea at all.
Have you been on the elevator?
No.
Nice.
Is it?
Yeah. Nice. I
No, we've
I
only
volunteer
been on it a
down
few
there,
times.
so.
Oh, you volunteer there?
Yeah, I like it down there.
Mm. You walk out in the middle of the bridge?
Oh, we walk the bridge a bit, and I basically sell T-shirts, but you talk to people. It's interesting, the people that come there and the reasons they're there, and it's very interesting. I love meeting the new people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Good folks.
from all over the world. It's fun. Anything else?
What?
Or you're
I
pooped
keep
out?
thinking of other things. No. One of the things that I think we've been really blessed with, and that's Marist College, Vassar College, New Paltz, Bard, and then all the community colleges around it. Just think about that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of horsepower. And on those campuses, they're the smartest people you ever want to meet. One time when I was on the board, I was at this. There was getting to be head bumping going on between the union and I said at one meeting, and I knew the chairman of the department, and I also knew the chairman of the union, and I said, you guys are so much smarter than all of us here, it's not fair. And they were brilliant guys.
Wow, it's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of nice colleges around here, a lot of education.
And I think they're starting to get the idea that they can have more of an impact on the community than they had historically. You think about it, Vass are all, it sort of like had a moat around it. Today, those kids are in all kinds of, doing all kinds of stuff, helping poor people,
Hmm.
and it's remarkable and a good thing.
That's where we were yesterday for the craft fair, and it was a fair trade fair.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all done by, the crafts were made by people who are in poor countries, women,
Oh,
mostly
oh,
women.
Oh,
It was interesting to see what they do.
so did you buy anything?
Hmm?
Did
Yeah,
you-
sure.
Sure.
I'm at a craft fair, I gotta buy something.
Well, thank you.
Well, okay, I guess we can wrap this up, and thank you so much for your time. And you're a very interesting person. You've done quite a bit in your life, so, but thank you very much. And, guess we'll see you at a meeting,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Yep.
And you get to take the cookies home.
Okay.
What'd she say?
She's on a diet. She's got a
Well,
real.
we are too, so we can't take them.
All right, I'm gonna eat my second, and
Did you do a minute?
No,
Have-
I'm
Oh, you-
getting
I'll
the
get
last
some,
side of the cookie.
Oh,
There you go.